Drew here, and if you really enjoyed Raised by Wolves Season 1, I imagine you're really going to enjoy this second season. From my perspective, there is no sophomore slump. And oftentimes when there's a sophomore slump, it's for one of two reasons. Either there was a lot of pressure on the showrunners to make something that people responded to well and they succeeded, and now they don't feel as much pressure, so they kind of slack off in the second season. And here that's clearly not the case. You look at all the effort that goes into this series, all the touches during the production, all the different individuals involved with just tailoring and crafting all the different elements of this world down to the fruit that the characters eat. And you just can tell that they really are enjoying creating these lush worlds for viewers to get to spend time in. And, second, sometimes I think that in a second season, when the creators didn't know where the series was going, or they put too much out there in the first season, there's bound to be a sophomore slump. But that's not the case here either, and I would argue that it shows how well the creators set up this season, because they managed to make the first season feel like the end of a chapter, but they still managed to put all the characters in position for this season to get off the ground quickly and for everyone to have something to do. And I think that the things I like about the first two episodes that are now available on HBO Max, and I'm going to get into some spoilers if you haven't watched this show up till now, and you're just kind of interested in hearing about it, you might want to keep watching. But if you haven't watched the first two episodes and you're planning to, definitely skip away now. But I'm not going to touch on everything. I don't want to recap the whole thing, but just some things that stood out to me in these two episodes. First, this show, I feel, is more about philosophy than anything else. And through the character interactions and through the way things go down, I think you get a lot of really interesting philosophical debates and questions. And I think that this episode, what the showrunner Aaron Gurkowski is trying to say, came a little bit more into focus, I feel. I think that he's trying to say that neither a society run purely by data and by science, or a society that's a theocracy, neither of these is going to have all the answers. It's really going to come down to individuals and their ability to form relationships, to form makeshift families. You'll see the groups are formed into not by, religious sect, or by, not being part of a religious sect, not being part of the Mithraic religion, but by these units that are forced together by expediency. And you'll see that, in all the cases, it's their ability to work together and to put aside their differences that's going to make these groups successful or to make them fail. And you see this with pretty much every group in the story. Even Marcus at this point, he has rescued three individuals. One's an android, one is a woman who is part of the Mithraic religion, and one is a man who was exiled from the Collective, which is this new group that has shown up, this atheist culture led by this supercomputer that's organic matter, called the Trust, which just bases its decisions on purely data. More on that in a moment. But so this person has fled the Collective. So Marcus is leading people not based, even though he has this idea that he's this religious prophet and that he's going to create this, new city. He's doing it in such a way that is now based on the idea that people should be free to be who they want to be, and that they should follow him because it's their choice, which is an interesting turn for him. I don't know that he really seemed set up to do this last season, but I think I'm interested to see where it goes, because it seems like an interesting, more nuanced take for the character. But again, this group can only function as long as the three individuals in it don't get too caught up in their own personal views, and they just function together amicably for the good of the group. You see, in the atheist community, it's interesting because this kind of throws things into a bit of question, that you have this computer, the Trust, kind of, I think, a metaphor for how, a lot of times people can put their their faith in science to solve all of humanity's problems. And at the end of the day, I think what this series is saying is that, if you have something that's making decisions purely based on data, but doesn't take into account individuals, doesn't take into account the needs of the few as it calculates the needs of the many, that there's always going to be some injustice. There's always going to be people that are left out of the overall calculation. And you see this in the way that it has Mother dispense justice to this person who committed a hate crime against the children that Mother and Father have been taking care of, many of whom are part of the old Mithraic religion. And that moment when, she realizes, this is what living in this society looks like. It means that we can justify beating an individual person, committing these horrible actions against them because it's for the good of the collective. So I think that's really interesting. I'm really interested to see all these themes explored over the course of the season. I think that standout moments in these first 2 episodes, I think most of the standout moments happened in the second episode because the first episode was mainly set up. But I love the new location. I think that they've done a really good job, once again, finding real life locations that look like they're on other planets. I love the addition of the acidic water and the way that they've used it in horrific ways. In the second episode in particular, there is one sequence where Seven, the creature, the snake-like creature that was born from Mother, goes and drags this house full of people into the acidic water, and just the horror of that moment. And it's done really, really well. Some of it's practical, some of it's digital, but it all blends together pretty seamlessly. I mean, I don't think the special effects on this show are perfect by any means, but I rarely find them distracting. I think they're good enough. I think that, there was an interesting sequence where Marcus, I think he's a really good depiction of the kind of appeal that a religious leader can have, even though, part of what's going on is that he has this energy he's giving off that is causing people to kind of get high off of his presence. But I think that's kind of a good metaphor for what some religious leaders have accomplished. Like, it is kind of a drug in a sense, when particularly with some cult leaders, the way that they motivate people to follow them. I think that that's the metaphor that they're kind of going for here. And it's interesting to see him motivating this person who says he just wants to be free to make his own decisions, but does he really? I mean, that's always the question with people like that. Do they really want to be free to make their own decisions, or do they want to have someone kind of directing them so that they feel like they're making their own decisions, but they're kind of doing what the other person wants them to do? And this sequence where Marcus is enacting his plan to take a tank away from the collective, and this person that has fled the collective to help him chooses to go and risk his life to help Marcus hijack the tank. I thought it was a good action sequence. I thought it was continuing to develop the relationship between the characters, and I appreciated it for those reasons. I'm also interested to really see the dynamic between Mother and Seven play out, because I'm not entirely clear what the nature of Seven is. At this point, there's kind of this debate going on between Campion and some of the other characters about whether or not this creature is intending evil. It's now being hunted by the group, and this is causing, it to react violently. But is it really evil in its essence? Is it really evil at its core, or is it just a frightened child? I thought it was really interesting that the showrunners in the after talk show mentioned that they kind of combined the sound of a crying child with the sound of a siren with this creature's cry, because I think that's a really good description of the way that the creature itself has been portrayed so far. And it really has an ominous presence, but at the same time, you kind of do feel that, like, if it were to be killed, you'd feel kind of a sense of regret that it came down to that had to be the way that it ended. I loved the sequence where Sue helped to cauterize the searchers on Mother so that she can no longer have children. I thought, the way that they explained it in the after show, there's such a great metaphor for her hardening her heart as she's going to go and try and kill this thing that has been born of her. And I'm interested to see how this plays out, whether, she can be brought to have love for her offspring once again, or whether she will kill it for the good of her human children that she's been programmed to protect above all else. I also think it's really interesting that, Father is seemingly very, very happy in the collective, and he's more willing to turn a blind eye to how, individuals within the collective might have their needs and their rights trampled for the greater good. He seems less horrified by the beating of this person who enacted a hate crime against them than Mother was. He seems to feel actually reassured by it, that their rights are protected, and he doesn't seem to care that this means that someone is going to have their rights trampled on. And at the end of the episode, when they're going out to hunt Seven, and he realizes that his job is to prod these people, to use them as live bait so that the snake-like creature will swallow them and then get blown up, and that they're willing to sacrifice, that the trust is willing to sacrifice any of these individuals to defeat this threat to the whole group, that he doesn't seem utterly appalled by it. In fact, he seems like he's willingly going to go along with it, that he seems to buy into this thinking that the trust is enacting more so than perhaps Mother does. She seems to be more individualistic in her thinking. So those are my thoughts on the first 2 episodes. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Raised by Wolves and other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.